Namaskarams and good morning to one and all. My name is V.K. Arun Kumar. I'm a PhD research scholar at the School of Music and Fine Arts, Vistas, Chennai. At the outset, I would like to welcome you all to this webinar, the 8th webinar in our series, Music and Dance Learning from Research and Experience. Today, we have our first international webinar with the topic, Rhythm in Dance and Music of India, a perspective from international scholars. I would like to welcome and thank the panelists for today for having accepted our invitation to present in this webinar. I would like to thank our management for their guidance and support. I would like to also thank our Vice Chancellor, Pro Vice Chancellor, Registrar, the Controller of Examinations for their kind encouragement to present all our webinars. Without further ado, I would like to invite Dr. S. Subbalakshmi Madam, our Director, to deliver the welcome address. Welcome, Madam.
Good morning. Welcome to the first international webinar conducted by the School of Music and Fine Arts, Vistas. It is also the 8th webinar in this series. First of all, I would like to thank the management of Vistas for their kind support and encouragement. I welcome Dr. Sriman Narayan, Vice Chancellor Vistas, will inaugurate the first international webinar of School of Music and Fine Arts, Vistas. I feel immensely happy to welcome the international scholars of various universities of United States of America. Dr. Rolf Grossbeck, Professor of Music, University of Arkansas, USA. Dr. Sarah Morelli, Associate Professor in Ethnomusicology, University of Denver, Colorado, USA. Dr. Zoe C. Sherinian, Professor of Ethnomusicology, University of Oklahoma, Norman, Oklahoma, USA. Thank you for your acceptance and paper presentation for this webinar. Again, I welcome you all for the first international webinar organized by the School of Music and Fine Arts, Vistas. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Madam. I would like to invite and welcome Dr. S. Sriman Narayanan Sir, the Vice Chancellor of Vistas, to deliver the inaugural address for our webinar. Welcome, sir.
A very good morning to all of you. Respected Dr. Rolf Grossbeck, Professor of Music, University of Arkansas. Respected Dr. Sarah Morelli, Associate Professor, University of Denver. Respected Dr. Joe Sherinian, Professor of Music, University of Oklahoma. Respected Professor Subbalakshmi, Director, School of Music and Fine Arts, Vistas, and dear participants. Once again, very good morning to all of you. I am very happy to inaugurate the first international webinar where they are going to discuss on Rhythm in Dance and Music of India, a perspective from international scholars. I am happy to say that our institution or our university is one of the few universities in India which has a department for music and fine arts. And I am happy to note that scholars from United States are going to talk about the traditional music of India. The scholars from the United States are Dr. Rolf Grossbeck, Professor of Music, University of Arkansas, who will be presenting about the chenda, which is the traditional instrument used in Kerala. Dr. Sarah Morelli, Associate Professor in Ethnomusicology, University of Denver, is going to talk about the Kathak, a classical dance of North India. And Dr. Joe Sherinian, Professor of Ethnomusicology of Oklahoma, is going to talk about the Tamil Parai. It is very exciting to see that the American scholars are giving demonstrations about Indian traditional musical instruments like Chenda, Parai, and about the Kathak. It is indeed a great achievement by these American scholars, and I feel very happy to inaugurate this wonderful webinar, and I congratulate the School of Music and Fine Arts Vistas, particularly Dr. Subbulakshmi, the director of the school, for arranging this wonderful international webinar. I wish all success for this international seminar. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Sriman Narayanan sir. We now move on to the webinar. Our first panelist for this morning, Dr. Rolf Grossbeck, Professor of Music History, Musicology, Ethnomusicology at the University of Arkansas, Little Rock, USA. He is an active ethnomusicologist and a performer in Chenda, piano, keyboards, and other percussion. His research has been mostly on the temple drumming of Kerala, where he conducted field work between 1988 and 1990, in 2000, 2006, and in 2012, receiving a grant from the American Institute of Indian Studies. He has published multiple articles in the International Journal of Hindu Studies, Ethnomusicology, Yearbook for Traditional Music, Asian Music, and Kala Samskaram, and encyclopedia entries in the Garland Encyclopedia of World Music and in the Sage Encyclopedia of Music and Culture, in addition to reviews in ethnomusicology, Asian music, world of music, museum anthropology, and Yearbook for Traditional Music. He has also presented papers twice at Harvard University, the University of Chicago, at meetings of the Society for Ethnomusicology, the College Music Society, at the South Asia Conference, Madison, Wisconsin, and at a meeting of the European Association of Social Anthropologists. He has served as president of 2 different regional chapters of SEM. His 1995 PhD dissertation is one of the monuments of the scholarly literature on the music of Kerala. In addition to his Chenda performances throughout Kerala and in many venues in the US, he has also performed classical piano, jazz piano, neo-soul, and soft rock keyboards, and Indian and Middle Eastern percussion with many ensembles nationally and internationally. Dr. Grossbeck previously taught at Vanderbilt, Brooklyn College, New York University, and the University of Virginia, among many other institutions. At UA, Little Rock, he teaches courses in music history, music theory, interdisciplinary studies, and world music, in addition to lessons in Chenda and Tabla, and directing numerous theses, and he also serves on the Arkansas Kerala Association's Executive Committee. Sir, we are very glad that you were able to accept our invitation and present in our webinar today. We welcome you for your presentation. Thank you very much, and please welcome, sir.
Hi, my name is Rolf Grossbeck. I'm a professor at the University of Arkansas at Little Rock in the United States. I teach music history, musicology, and ethnomusicology. My training is mostly in ethnomusicology. My special area is the Kshetra Vadya Kala, the temple instrumental music of Kerala, especially a drum called the Chenda, which is a cylindrical stick drum that's played there. This is an example of the Chenda, again about 2 feet long, 1 foot wide or so, played either with one stick in one hand or with 2 sticks. the Chenda participates in performances for temple ritual and festivals and dance drama. The temple ritual and festivals genres are sometimes given the name Kshetra Kala, temple instrumental music, and as well as dance drama. It thrives in central Kerala, but increasingly in Kerala as a whole, and also in the Kerala, the Malayali diaspora, which is the Gulf, Scotland, Great Britain, the United States, Singapore, Malaysia, different parts of India. Really, you can hear this Kshetra Kala really in much of the world. The three genres that I want to concentrate on is how the Chenda is used in the different rhythms it plays in three different genres. One of them is Kathakali dance drama, one of them is Chenda Melam, one of them is Tayambaka. Some of you may not be familiar with all of these, so I want to just briefly talk about each of them. The Kathakali dance drama is accompanied by two main drums called the Chenda and also a madalam, a barrel drum. And in the back, it's accompanied by two singers. You can see in the back, one of them is playing the Chengalam flat gong. One of them is playing the Ilatalam, a set of cymbals. Female characters are often accompanied by the Idika, a small tension drum. So the tala is kept by the singers in the back, and then the rhythms are played by the drums to the left. The Vaishyams are portraying the characters and stories from the Hindu epics, various characters and stories from the Hindu epics, what's going on with the actors. I'll just show you a little bit of it. See, the singers are singing the padam, or the basic vocal composition, that the Vaishyam is showing through his hand gestures and mudras. This is Kuchela. The play is called Kuchela Vritam. It's about Kuchela's visit to his childhood friend Krishna. And the mudras that the Kuchela is bringing out with his hands are reinforced by the drum patterns played by the Chenda in the back and the madalam. Okay, a second genre that I'm going to talk about is called Chenda Melam. It's a temple festival. It's a composition played for temple festival processions. It involves, let's see if I can get a good video of this. Yeah, it's basically what's going on is the guys to the right are playing the komba, a horn. The guys to the left is a row of people playing kurum kural, a wind instrument, somewhat like a small nagaswaram. And then to the left, you're good to the extreme left of the video, you're going to see the Chenda players, some of whom are playing rhythmic compositions, and some of them in the back are playing, are articulating the tala. In this case, it's a 24 akshara tala. Yeah, you can see the Chenda guys in the front who are playing this rhythmic pattern. In the back are the Ilatalam players and the people playing the right side of the Chenda, and they're articulating the basic tala. I'm going to get back to that a little bit later on. A little bit later on. And then a third genre that I'm going to talk about is called Tayambaka, which is a solo composition for Chenda. Tayambaka, the lead Chenda player, is playing the primary rhythms, is in the front. He's playing the left side of the Chenda. The left side of the Chenda has a higher pitch sound. And the right side of the Chenda is basically keeping tala that has a lower pitch sound like that. So what's happening is that the guy playing the left side, the Identala, is playing the main performer in the center, and then he's surrounded by others playing the left side of the chenda. Many's playing the right side of the chenda, and the Ilatalan players in the back. And what they're all doing is reinforcing the tala. In this case, it's an 8-beat tala. I'm going to go back to that a little bit later, but that's basically how chenda works, how Tayambaka works. Much of Tayambaka is in this 8-matra tala with 1 or sometimes 2, 3, even 5 main chenda players, and then others who are articulating the tala. Consistently, there's a disjunction in the Kerala music between those who are articulating the tala cycle and those who are playing rhythmic compositions on top of it. Chenda is played at a number of other genres, one called Teyyam, a propitiation ritual, another propitiation ritual called Murietta, and many others. It's played at Christian churches a great deal now, as well as temples. It's a pretty ubiquitous instrument in Kerala, as well as I said earlier, in the Malayali diaspora. But I wanted to focus most of this talk on the remainder of the talk on just the rhythms that are used for the chenda and how they differ from genre to genre. The technique is the same. If you're going to learn how to play chenda, you have to play certain technical exercises. You have to learn certain rudiments that are played, and they really build on everything. It's very rare to learn Kathakali without having learned Tayambaka and Chenda Melam first. And a lot of chenda players clearly play all three, but they use very different approaches. In Chenda Melam, for instance, basically what's going on is you're playing repeated rhythmic patterns on the left side of the chenda that are punctuated by colossians or cadential patterns. The tala is kept by the right side of the chenda and the ilatalam, but the repeated rhythmic patterns are emphasized by the left side of the chenda of the identala. What's going on here is I want to play an example of of what the chenda is doing in the third section of a type of chenda melam called Panchari melam. Panchari melam is in 5 different sections. The first is in Panchari tala, which is 96 matras to the tala vaktam. The second is second column, 48 matras to the tala vaktam. Third, 24 matras. Fourth, 12. Fifth, 6. So there's at least 5 main sections to the Panchari melam. I just want to demonstrate a short part of the third section, the 24-beat tala section, to show you basically what the left side of the chenda is doing in this. So I don't have my tala keepers with me today. So I'm just going to play on this boombox. I'm going to play an example of what the 24-beat tala would be when played on the right side of the chenda and the ilatalam, and then I'm going to play what the left side of the chenda plays on top of that. 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27, 28, 29, 30, 31, 32, 33, 34, 35, 36, 37, 38, 39, 40, 41, 42, 43, 44, 45, 46, 47, 48, 49, 50, 51, 52, 53, 54, 55, 56, 57, 58, 59, 60, 61, 62, 63, 64, 65, 66, 67, 68, 69, 70, 71, 72, 73, 74, 75, 76, 77, 78, 79, 80, 81, 82, 83, 84, 85, 86, 87, 88, 89, 90, 91, 92, 93, 94, 95, 96, 97, 98, 99, 100, 101, 102, 103, 104, 105, 106, 107, 108, 109, 110, 111, 112, 113, 114, 115, 116, 117, 118, 119, 120, 121, 122, 123, 124, 125, 126, 127, 128, 129, 130, 131, 132, 133, 134, 1 So you can see what's happening there is that I was playing this repeated pattern many times, and then I went into the collachum, the section that went that. I'm ending the kind of small section here. Basically what's happened, and now I want to play just a little bit of how this works so you can see of how it works in the context of the overall performance. This is the repeated pattern. Again, the guys in the back are articulating the tala. The guys in the front are playing the basic rhythmic composition. They're going to go into the collachum really soon. This is the collachum. It's not exactly the same one I played. Something similar. Okay, and so forth. So basically what's going on, it's sort of simple in a way because there are these very repeated patterns punctuated by collachums played by the whole chenda players together as a group. The emphasis throughout is on stamina and strength. This particular performance is, about an hour and 10 minutes long. Some of them are much, much longer than that. So it requires a great deal of strength or kanam to be able to perform this, and also a great deal of right stick technique, something that's called sadhakam. The skills required to accompany Kathakali are very different. Well, somewhat similar, but what's added to this is then the ability to articulate the movements of the Vaishyams, the actors. This example I'm going to show you is from a Kathakali performance called here we go. From Purapad. Purapad is part of the preliminaries of Kathakali. Yeah, it's part of the preliminaries of Kathakali. What's going to happen is that there's a section called the Padam, which is sung with very, very light chenda and madalam accompaniment of it, and then the Kalasham, where the emphasis is on the drumming and the Chengalam and the Ilatalam playing. The singers don't sing at this point. So the Kalasham, it's where the Kalasham is going, that the actors, that the Vaishyams, there are 4 of them here, are going to move their eyes in specific ways, and then they're going to be reinforced by the performance of the Chenda. The Chenda is going to do certain things that's going to reinforce what the actors are doing. Thus, let's see if I can show this. So basically, I'm going to play the Kalasham that this Chenda player, more or less the same thing that this Chenda player is doing, and you'll hear a specific rudiment, or a couple of specific rudiments that often reinforce the movements of the actors. This particular part of the Purapad is in 32 matras to the Kalavata, 9, 10, 11. duratim, and later on, duradim. Those are the cues for the Vaishyans to move their eyes back and forth. So to the left, to the right, 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 and so forth. Let me try and show you how it works out in terms of what's happening in the acting. I'll get to the very end of the padam, the sung part, then we'll get to the kalasham. When I'm on the kalasham, again, watch the actor's eyes real quick, carefully. One, two. You can see the model player here on the left. Here's the kalasham starting now. Eyes move to the right, to the left, to the right, left, right, left, left, right, left, right, 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 left, right, left, left, right, left, right, left, right, left, right, left, right. So the right and the left are indicating when the Vaishyans are going left, right, left, right, left, right. And each of those movements is emphasized by a rhythmic pattern in the chenda. Again, very frequently this pattern. What's going on here, and there are lots of examples I can show that are examples of this as well, is that basically what the chenda is playing is his emphasizing his close relationship to the actions of the Vaishyam, or the actor. It's like in the best Kathakali, the Vaishyam and the chenda, it's like they're two bodies but one creative spirit. They're basically on the same page, acting out the play together, working out the play, the rasa of the play, the movements of the play, and so forth, together at the same time, very synchronized. And that's what a great chenda player for Kathakali is. You have to be completely attuned to what the actors are all doing. Tayambaka is different. Tayambaka is basically the emphasis in contemporary Tayambaka, by contemporary, last 40 years or so, is on improvisation. There are short fixed segments that are juxtaposed with improvised segments that are performed, that are performed with improvised segments. I'll just give you a short example from towards the beginning. When you learn to play Tayambaka, what you're doing is, you're playing a juxtaposition between very short segments called ennams and then longer filler sections called nila. Let me show you a little bit of this. Six, seven, so there what I was doing, I was juxtaposing the ennam with the nila. But when you start playing chenda at a more advanced level, you have to start doing manodramams, or podis, podi means dust, manodramams in place of the nila. So it's something more like this. doing this nilla, I was doing something like this. And so forth. And that's actually the pretty. It's kind of a thick segment, but the ideal is to, in these sections, these monodromum sections that replace the nillas, there has to be some improvisation, some monodromum. The guys who are really good at this, they do it to a much larger degree than I just did. I want to show you this performer named Charutaram Chandran from North Kerala, and this is a small part of a time like he did. He'll do that same endnum that I did, the one that goes just... And you can hear that, but then he fills up the nilla with monodromum, and the monodromum is a real ride. Let's see if we can catch it all. Here's the endnum. Here's the monodromum. Here's the endnum. Endnum. More monodromum. Endnum again. Monodromum. So what he's doing in this section, he's playing that short segment called endnum, the same thing I did. But then when he finishes it, he starts with this monodromum. All the monodromums are different from all the others. When you get the idea that this performance is an hour and 25 minutes long, you have to have a lot of bhavana, you have a lot of imagination to come up with these new monodromums every single time out. And just considering these guys sometimes do 100, 200 performances a year, just their imagination, their ability to come up with this new rhythm, this new kota is just really extraordinary. So that's what the emphasis is on very often when you're playing Tayambaka. It's not so much accompanying the dancers or playing in a group, but it's just your ability of your imagination. But what this means is that to be a great chenda player, or really any instrument, Kshetra Vadyakala, any of the Kerala instruments, it's being able to do a lot of different things. It's having the strength, kannam, it's having the sadhakam, the right stick ability, the left hand's ability to play sweetness, to be able to play many different sounds on the chenda, to accompany dancers, to accompany ritual, to play in groups, and to play in solos, and so forth. This emphasis on versatility, the roots of it, I think, are in the caste job of one of the most important drumming communities in Kerala, the Mar or Kodawal community. They have to play many different instruments, but they also have to master many singing styles, the Sopana Sangeetam singing styles as well. They're multitaskers. The fact that they're doing so many different things in so many different contexts, emphasizing the dancer in Kathakali, the strength and the repetitive patterns in Chendamelam, and the bhavana, the imagination in Monodromam. It just rewards the study. It makes it very rewarding to study these vadyams, to play them, and it's also very, very rewarding to do research on them as well. Thanks.
Hello. Arunji had asked me to respond to 3 questions that were posed by the department. The first question was about your learning experience in India, your gurus, and places where you visited while being a student. I studied mostly in the Kerala Kala Mandalam, which is a state arts institution in Cheruthuruti, which is at the border between Trichy and Palghat district in central Kerala. For 2.5 years, my main ashan was Balaraman, but I also studied with Uni Krishnan and Vijay Krishnan and Rajan, all of whom are well-known Kathakali, Chenda, and Tayambaka performers. I visited really all over Kerala. I lived mostly in Cheruthuruthi, but I also lived briefly in Tiruvananthapuram in the south, and I've just traveled really all over Kerala. The second question was about are there any bowls or solkatu that are commonly used? Could I please demonstrate? The second endem of Tayambaka, which I talked a little bit about in my talk, the first part of the Vaitari for that, it's called Vaitari in Kerala, as opposed to bowls or solkatu. The Vaitari go like this: Didi geta takataragam, na dim, na kam, na din na kam, na kam, na Didi geta takataragam, na kam, na kina kinana, kuna kunana, kina kinana, kana kanana, kinana kunana, kinana of that particular endem. And the third question was about, are there any specific places where the art form is performed? Everywhere, just temples throughout central Kerala, but North Kerala also, increasingly South Kerala, and again, wherever the Malayali diaspora is, like Delhi, Chennai, Mumbai, you can hear it wherever there are Malayalis. And the Gulf, you can hear all these genres. You can hear the Chendamelams at processions. You can hear the Tayambakas. You can hear Kathakali at a variety of places. Such things as Purams, Ulsavams, Ayyappan, Vilika, and so forth. In terms of any special significant events you have participated in, I've performed the Kathakali Chenda and Tayambaka, no Melam actually, at a variety of places in the United States and also in India through many performances in Kerala. My best memory is for my Ashan Balaraman's Shashti Aptapurti, his 60th birthday celebration, which was in Shornur, which is now his native place, and I gave a performance there, which is special, in addition to performances at the Kala Mandalam, at very many other institutions, and at the houses of some of my Nambutiri friends who were having like a wedding or something like that, and also at a number of temples. If you guys have any more questions that you'd ask, definitely reach out to me. I think I gave my email address to Arunji, and I'd love to communicate with any of you. Thank you very, very much for this opportunity. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Dr. Rolf. It was a great privilege to hear you present today for our international webinar, and I would like to again thank you for accepting our invitation and presenting today. Our next panelist is Dr. Sarah Murali. She is an associate professor and chair of the Department of Musicology and Ethnomusicology at the University of Denver, Colorado, USA's Lamont School of Music. She completed her PhD in Harvard University in 2007. Active as a scholar and performer, her work draws on training with Hindustani music maestro Ustad Ali Akbar Khan, voice and sarod, with Kathak dance master Pandit Chitresh Das, and with noted disciples. Her monograph, A Guru's Journey, Pandit Chitresh Das and the Indian Classical Dance and Diaspora, University of Illinois Press 2019, is an ethnographic examination of Pandit Das's artistic contributions and the development of Kathak's California Gharana. This research has also led to various other publications. As a performer, Sarah is a founding member of the Leela Dance Collective. Her Kathak performances have included full solos and leading roles in productions in US and India at venues such as Mumbai's Royal Opera House, LA's Ford Amphitheater, and Philadelphia's Kimmel Center. Sarah is founder and artistic director of Surila, a Kathak academy in Denver, Colorado. They have recently joined the sister schools in Los Angeles, San Francisco, and New York in creating the national institution, the Leela Institute of Kathak. We welcome you, Dr. Sarah Murali, for our international webinar. Thank you so much for accepting our invitation and also suggesting and brainstorming with regards to the topic and the panelists for today's webinar. Welcome for your presentation.
Namaskaram. I want to begin by offering my thanks to Dr. S. Subbulakshmi, Director of the School of Music and Fine Arts, and to the other administrators and leaders of the Vales Institute for the opportunity to participate in this international webinar series. My sincere appreciation also to VK Arun Kumar for inviting me to help in envisioning this particular international webinar. Most of what I'm going to share today is drawn from research from my recently published book titled A Guru's Journey, which examines multiple influences on the performance, creative work, and pedagogy of Kathak master Pandit Chitresh Das. His influences include his mother and father, Srimati Nilima Das and Nrityacharya Prahlad Das, both dancers who founded the institution Nritya Bharati in Kolkata in the years before and following India's independence, and his Guruji, Pandit Ram Narayan Mishra, originally from Rajasthan, who trained there in Jaipur Gharana Kathak, and as a young man moved to Kolkata, where he trained in the Lucknow Gharana of Kathak from the renowned gurus Achan Maharaj Ji and Shambhu Maharaj Ji. Pandit Das was also greatly influenced by living in the United States, his adopted home since 1970. As you will see in this presentation, Carnatic rhythmic theory, in particular the concept of jatis, influenced his development in specific ways, which have come to be common practice within Pandit Das's Kathak lineage, now known as the California Gharana. As with many diasporic artists, Pandit Das's adaptations of Indian performance practices revealed deliberate efforts to attract, educate, and retain new audiences. As a performer, Pandit Das found that success in the United States in particular necessitated both making specific changes to the material he performed and developing strategies for preemptively shaping audiences' expectations. The changes he made, like those by Uday Shankar Ji and other artists who found success in the West before him, as scholar Joan Erdman suggests, quote, the result of learning and intuition honed by many cues and experiences in presenting Indian performances in the West. Today, as I mentioned, I'm going to focus on just one of Pandit Das's developments, the use of Carnatic rhythmic groupings called jatis. As many of you viewing this webinar will already know, jatis include the units 3 or tisra, expressed by the syllables takita, 4 or chatusra jati, takadimi. 5, khanda jati, is made up of 2 and 3 together, taka takita, or sometimes reversed, takita taka. 7, mishra jati, is 3 plus 4, takita takadimi, or reversed 4 plus 3. And 9, sankirna jati, is some combination of 4 plus 2 plus 3, or as Pandit Das more commonly used it, 2 plus 3 plus 4, taka takita takadimi. Pandit Das most often utilized them in this ascending order, with additive groupings beginning with the smallest number and progressing to the largest. However, South Indian music theorists most commonly list these jatis in the order of 4, 3, 7, 5, and 9. T. Viswanathan and Matthew Allen note that these 5 groupings, quote, permeate Carnatic rhythmic thinking, both at a macro level as building blocks out of which lengthy improvisations are structured, and at a micro level as the 5 ways in which an individual beat may be internally subdivided, end quote. In his dissertation, Mridangam Minds, Laya researcher and Mridangam player David Nelson clarifies that, quote, the term jati refers specifically to the duration of the laghu within a given tala structure. In Hindustani music, we might translate this use of jati as the number of matras within a given vibhag or subdivision of the tal. I bring this up to clarify that Pandit Das did not utilize the concept of jati in referring to tala structure, but rather in its other usage, that of organizing phrases within larger compositions. He also used jati to refer to groupings within one beat, which in Carnatic music theory would be distinguished as gati. Pandit Das cited his father, Prahlad Das, as his primary influence for using the jatis. As he told me in an interview in 2005, quote, in Kathak we always had chants, meaning rhythms or grooves, And some of them were in Mishra Jati, some were even in Sankirnam, but we didn't call it that. My father was a dance scholar, so he looked into these things, and I was surrounded by these ideas from childhood because my parents' dance school, Nritya Bharati, was in our house. So I grew up with Bharatnatyam and Kathakali dancers around. While the Jati system is sometimes used by Hindustani musicians, in North Indian practice, as Martin Clayton argues, quote, divisions into 5 or 7 parts, Khanda and Mishra Jatis, are somewhat rare, and those into 9, Sankirna Jati, exceedingly so, end quote. Again, Pandit Das utilized Jati divisions, both as ways to subdivide one beat, referred to as Gati in the Carnatic system, and in its more common usage as groupings within larger compositional structures. While Pandit Das utilized the Jati groupings in dance, of course, this work is often preceded by recitation sessions, akin to Solkattu practice. In one such usage, we recite the 5 jatis in ascending order with each syllable given equal duration. When one gap of equal duration is added to separate each grouping, they fit nicely into the 16-beat Teen Tal structure, with the caveat that no gap is included between the last syllable of the last grouping and some, beat 1 of the next cycle of the Tal. Here's how these groupings can be transcribed into Hindustani rhythmic notation. Note that each dash equals a rest of equal duration as a syllable, and scoops show the syllables and dashes that all fall within one particular matra or beat. I'm now going to recite with 2 bols or syllables per beat, fitting all of the 5 jatis within one cycle or avartan of Teen Tal. And I'm going to keep Teen Tal and show it on the hands at the same time. So I'll start just setting the laya or setting the tempo with 13 and start on 1. 13, 14, 15, 16, ta gita, ta ka di mi, ta ka ta gita, ta gita, ta ka di mi, ta ka ta gita, ta ka di mi. Beat 1. Jatis formed the building blocks for Pandit Das's production Panchajati, a full choreographed work which the Chitresh Das Dance Company premiered in 2002. Panchajati comprised 6 movements. Its introductory section, which I'll show momentarily, is based on utilizing all 5 jatis in the manner I've demonstrated. The middle movements of Panchajati were each devoted to the exploration of 1 or 2 specific jatis, and the final section brought all the jatis together again. Panchajati fused North and South Indian rhythmic frameworks. In its exploration of the Carnatic Jatis, the entire work was structured within the Hindustani tal, teen tal, in Vilambit laya or slow tempo. The production included Carnatic percussion instruments, including tabl, kanjira, and mursing. Pandit Das also encouraged the Hindustani instrumentalists to play in a, quote, South Indian style. For example, making use of heavier and wider gamak than is often used in Hindustani music. The melodic materials themselves further amplified the connection of North and South Indian classical traditions. The rag used for much of the performance utilizes a pentatonic scale, sa re ga pa da sa, commonly known in Hindustani music as rag bhup or bhupali, and known as mohanam in Carnatic music. Visually, however, as you saw, the work was more contemporary in presentation. Instead of colorful, ornate costumes typically worn by Kathak dancers, the dance company wore unadorned shalwar kameezes of white satin. Rather than showing off individual dancers, these costumes highlighted the lighting, design, and the group as a whole, elements perceived to be more important within Western modernist choreographic sensibilities. Pandit Das also utilized the jatis in his signature performance piece called The Train, or Railgadi. This performance, which involved no external time cycle, no tal framework, was simultaneously the most popular and most controversial item from Pandit Das's repertoire. Presenting a steam engine's journey from one railway station to another, it evoked the nostalgic sounds of yesteryear. As Pandit Das described, quote, "It's all a gamut of sound and speed variations, and the whole thing is just footwork," end quote. As he suggests, his feet and ghungru, bells, were the piece's sole instruments. Pandit Das felt this lack of accompanying tabla or melodic instruments drew perhaps the most criticism. The Train showcased technical prowess without requiring much understanding of the structure or aesthetics of the art form. Although it was always a crowd pleaser, over the course of his career, he increasingly highlighted aspects of its technical sophistication, particularly through its use of jatis, to advance critical appreciation of the work. Just before presenting the Train in concerts, Pandit Das would demonstrate footwork variations on the 5 jatis, such as in the following video example from a solo performance in September 2008.
All that jatis, the train going out of the station.
We'll see the full performance of The Train momentarily. In Pandit Das's repertoire, this piece held a special place. Because of its unique nature and long-standing popularity, one can trace its mention over time, thereby gaining a sense of the changes in Pandit Das's manner of presentation. This composition was taught to him by his Guruji when he was 9 years old. At the beginning of his performance career, as a young man in 1970, Pandit Das was adamant to differentiate his performance of the train from traditional Kathak. Quote, "I don't call it Kathak. I warn my audience. I deliberately step out of the classical tradition. Then I can experiment. But it is not Kathak," end quote. And that was in an interview for the Kolkata magazine Junior Statesman. During a 1981 interview, 11 years later for The Telegraph, Pandit Das described the train as being based on Khanda Jati. With this revelation, the interviewer writes, quote, "The theme is modern, but the treatment is very much classical," end quote. And by the late 1990s, Pandit Das's performances of the train utilized all 5 Jati groupings. His use of Jatis was crucial in garnering support for the piece, particularly from Indian audiences. Pandit Das described to me once a, quote, "great commotion regarding the train" when performing at a Calcutta festival in 1996. Quote, "As soon as I came on the stage, the people howled for the train," end quote. As he indicated he would oblige the request, a noted female Kathak dancer in the audience stood and publicly challenged the validity of the piece, saying, as Pandit Das recalls, "What is this train? Who taught you this?" He responded, "Well, my Guruji taught me this." When she further challenged him to justify the piece, he explained that it involved the 5 Jatis. Pressing him yet further, she reportedly replied, "Show us Panchajati." In response, he performed variations of a paran, a type of composition utilizing the bowls dhata ketunga, by transforming the bowls of the paran to fit the rhythmic structures of each of the 5 Jatis. In later years, rather than giving audience members a chance to challenge his work, he preemptively described the Jatis and demonstrated each one through several footwork variations, as you saw. And then, of course, he utilizes the Jatis in performing the train. As Pandit Das describes, the piece involves, quote, "the sound of a railway carriage leaving the station, changing tracks, gathering speed, crossing a bridge, passing open fields and trees, slowing down, changing tracks again, and finally reaching its destination and coming to a halt at the platform." I utilized transcription in Western staff notation to assist in analyzing the piece, using special note heads indicating different ways of striking the floor. My transcription revealed that Pandit Das indeed made use of each of the Jatis, although some at a breathtaking speed that renders them almost indistinguishable. In certain portions of the video recording of this performance, I could not follow all of the movements of Pandit Das's feet when the video played at normal speed. To create and verify this transcription, then, I alternated between watching the footage at 30% of the original speed without sound and listening to the sounds produced at their original speed. In addition to the Jatis, Pandit Das also included other groupings. At times, he only hinted at rhythmic ideas before shifting to others, and he accelerated or decelerated at will, all to serve his sonic portrait. At the beginning of the performance, Pandit Das made use of Khanda Jati to evoke the sounds of a train's engine as it starts up and begins to move. Full slaps of the foot on beats 1 and 3, in measure 1, here shown by X's, represent the train's engine. These are followed by lighter taps of the toes, in measure 2, to indicate its sounds echoing off the train station's vaulted ceiling. As Pandit Das's train left the station, it crossed other train tracks, which he represented by performing purposely irregular patterns of footwork, grouped mainly into 7s and 6s. Following a transitional 2-step phrase, Pandit Das provided this section's clearest articulation of Mishra Jati's typical 3+4 subgroupings by accenting the 1st and 4th steps. A regular footwork pattern begins as the train settles into a steady pace. While this pattern, called Eri Tatkar, is generally perceived by Kathak dancers as groupings of 8, its special emphasis on footfalls 1 and 5, with slaps of the full foot instead of the heel, also audibly divides the phrase into groupings of 4, Chatusra Jati. Not to rest long in any regular pattern, Pandit Das communicated to the audience that an electric train was about to pass his steam engine train, going in the opposite direction at full speed. After a slight pause, followed by rapid acceleration of his heel work at the end of measure 3, Pandit Das launched into fast footwork technique we call Dhingra Dhangra, triplet Tisra Jati patterns produced so rapidly that the heel work is almost indistinguishable. After the train passes small houses and bridges performed with footwork techniques Takita Takita Taka and Dina Dina, the train approaches its destination by again crossing over sets of tracks that would lead other trains to and from the station. He approached the tracks with the now familiar Chatusra Jati or Eri Tatkar footwork, and then he performed a quick set of 6 slaps followed by 4 bass sounds, transitioned immediately into the performance's only 2 groupings of Sankirna and Mishra. Here, these are on lines 2 and 3. In the first appearance, Sankirna Mishra is presented with 9 steps grouped as 2 plus 3 plus 4, Taka Takita Takadimi, and 7 grouped as 3 plus 4, Takita Takadimi. In measures 5 and 6, he produced the same number of footfalls, but did not group them into smaller increments, instead differentiating his footwork groupings with only a brush step on the final 9th and 7th steps of the phrases. Pandit Das ended this section with 2 groupings of 10 steps each before returning to Chatusra Jati, regular motion of the train, and finally slowing as if a train braking to approach the station, reprising footwork patterns of Khanda Jati used at the beginning of the performance. Here's the train.
Signal down. Electric container. Then fasten the full speed. Small houses, small bridges. Small houses. Great. From one view to another. shape. And so the platform, like upside the shape. Platform.
In conclusion, in the train, Pandit Das highlighted the jatis in order to provide a theoretical basis and technical grounding for this evocative piece. Like many South Asian performing artists who preceded him in the United States, Pandit Das necessarily developed sophisticated techniques for dealing with the expectations of new audience members as well as audiences in India. His demonstration of each jati before performing the train helped spectators better understand the piece's technical virtuosity. And Pandit Das's use of jatis was crucial in garnering support for the piece, particularly from Indian audiences. In utilizing aspects of South Indian rhythmic theory, Pandit Das and other North Indian classical artists draw on the symbolic importance of South India as a source of tradition and antiquity. I understand the department has a few questions for each of us, which I'll do my best to answer succinctly. First, in regards to my learning experience in India, my first year of learning in India was in Tamil Nadu, in Madurai actually, but most of my training in Kathak happened in California. I studied for some years simultaneously with my Guruji, Pandit Chitresh Das, and also, to my great fortune, renowned Sarod master Ali Akbar Khan. I discussed some of the aspects of studying with them in an interview I did recently for Pandit Das's school, Chandam. That and other interviews can be found at kathak.org/blog in the link that I'm showing now. These celebrate Chandam's 40th year anniversary and the making of the California Gharana of Kathak. Ali Akbar Khan Sahib had moved to the United States and established a school in California in the late 1960s, which became the major center for Hindustani music training in the US and enabled many major artists to also teach in the US, including my own Guruji, as well as Pandits G.S. Sachdev, Zakir Hussain, Swapan Chaudhry, and several others who taught at the college over the years. Kathak, like Hindustani music, is one of the major art traditions performed on the world stage today. It was, for some of its history, a court tradition performed in elite salons, and much of its technical sophistication is believed to derive from those contexts. I actually discuss some of my most memorable performances in the written interview with the link that I just mentioned, but I'll share a couple others here quickly. It was a very special experience as a foreign artist to be invited to perform at the Sri Aurobindo Ashram in Puducherry, and most recently for a festival held at Mumbai's Royal Opera House in the Leela Dance Collective production, Son of the Wind, in which I've had the honor to play Sri Ram Chandra. Regarding the dance's technical aspects, you've already seen a number of footwork patterns we use based in Carnatic jatis. Two very common footwork patterns in Kathak include tatkar, with the bowls ta-te-te-tat, a-te-te-tat, or right, left, right, left, left, right, left, right, which, like all footwork, can be performed at different speeds relative to the passage of the tal. And this is a footwork pattern known as tarikita. and I'll let this example play through a short composition. Thank you again for this opportunity. Namaskar.
Thank you so much, Dr. Sarah Murali, for your wonderful presentation in today's webinar. Thank you so much again for accepting our invitation to present today. Our next panelist is Dr. Zoe Sherinian. She is a professor of ethnomusicology at the University of Oklahoma with research interests in Christian indigenization, percussion, the intersectionality between caste, class, and gender, activist ethnomusicology, and ethnomusicological film. She has published the book Tamil Folk Music as Dalit Liberation Theology, was co-editor for Making Congregational Music Local, Indigenous Songs and Cosmopolitan Styles in the Music of Global Christianity, as well as articles on the indigenization of Christianity in ethnomusicology. Other recent publications include articles for 3 of the Oxford Handbook series, including Applied Ethnomusicology, Christian Music, and the lead article in the book Curing the Field, Sounding Out Ethnomusicology. She has produced and directed 2 documentary films. This is A Music, Reclaiming an Untouchable Drum, on the changing status of Dalit drummers in India, and Shakti Vibrations on the use of Tamil folk arts to develop self-esteem at the Shakti Folk Cultural Center. She is presently writing a monograph entitled Drumming Our Liberation. Other current projects include co-editing a reader called Music and Dance as Everyday Life in South Asia. Sherinian is an active musician who performs and conducts trainings on the parai drum, plays the mridangam and jazz drum set as well. We are very glad to have you, Dr. Zoe Sherinian, for our webinar this morning. I would like to welcome you for your presentation. Thank you.
The title of my talk today is Systematic and Embodied Music Theory of Tamil Parai Drummers. The parai is a frame drum made of cow or water buffalo skin played with 2 sticks. In Tamil Nadu, India, as well as several surrounding southern states, the parai has, for at least the last 1,000 years, been played as a caste duty or kadamai by members of untouchable outcast groups. Politicized members of these communities call themselves by the anti-caste term Dalit, while some drummers still see themselves as slaves or adimai. The majority of professional performers come from the Pariyar community, whose Jati names comes from the drum. The drum is also called tappu, related to dappu in Andhra and duff or dup in parts of North India and the Middle East, and with some negativity, the term kotu. However, the etymological meaning of the word parai is to speak or announce, paraidal, reflecting the drum's function to announce both auspicious and inauspicious ritual occasions within the Hindu life cycle. The word parai as a general term for drum and as a specific drum, likely with a kettle or bowl shape, is seen throughout Tamil Sangam poetry from the 3rd century BCE to the 3rd century CE. There are 44 incidents of it there. The power of the Parai sound is considered by Hindus to bring on possession by the goddess and to take the soul to the next reincarnation. Sangam poetry, as well as later sources, tell us that the Parisatra, or the announcing drum, was also used to lead kings into battle. While some of these functions historically gave a valued status to the Parai, the drum and its drummers, for at least the last few centuries, are primarily defined by the Parai's function to announce death, a caste duty or kadamai that in turn degrades its performers because of the Hindu association of death with pollution. Further, the drum is made from animal skin, considered polluting to the touch by Hindus. Thus, the middle caste, hierarchically just above the outcaste, particularly the Sudra, BC and MBC groups such as the Tevars and Konars in Tamil Nadu, attribute ritual power to the drummers in their performance. They believe the Parai sound will take the soul of the dead to heaven and are thus quite dependent on the outcast to perform this ritual duty. Yet, they in turn mitigate this power through identifying the Pariyars and Chakliyars with stigma and degradation as performers of the drum. Yet the drummers do not agree with this assessment. They believe their profession is performing an instrument worthy of being called music or isai.
அவங்க சொல்கிறத வந்து நாங்கள் கோவப்படலாம் மாட்டோம். நாங்கள் தொழில் கற்றவங்க கோவப்பட மாட்டோம். நாங்கள் அவங்கள கூப்பிட்டு சொல்கிறது, இங்கே வாங்க, இது வந்து ஒரு இசைங்க, இது உனக்கு புரிய தெரியல, அதனால் உனக்கு மண்டையில் மைண்டு யாரும் கிடையாது, நீ அதெல்லாம் போய் பேசிக்கிட்டு இருக்க, ஒன்றே மாதிரி நான் அவட சுற்றி நாங்கள் கேட்டுப்பார், என்னுடைய விவரம் என்ன அப்படின்னு கேட்டுப்பார், இந்த மாதிரிலாம் ஈதத்தனமா பேசிட்டு போகாத அப்படின்னு அவங்களை கூப்பிட்டு நாங்கள் விவரம் சொல்லுவோம். அதுக்காக நாங்கள் அவங்களை கோவப்பட்டு பேச விட மாட்டோம்.
A defining step in the process of shifting identity from outcast jati or Harijan to Dalit for these drummers is to proclaim the sound of their drum as music. Ida or Isai is what Amal declared. Indeed, this is the title of my first documentary film. My teachers never felt the need to convince me of understanding of their practice as music. While Amalraj clearly believes that their practice contained complexities that are difficult for ordinary people to understand, with me, they emphasize the theoretical aspects of performance that they believe contain the essence of the musical art. For example, my teacher S.A. described the Isai, or the music of the practice, to be in the left hand stroke, which functions in the musical texture as a cutting timekeeper against the lower bass accents played with the right hand. Furthermore, he emphasized the importance of dancing while learning to drum in order to internalize and bring together the performance aesthetics. From an analytical perspective, it's easy to describe Parai music theory on a continuum with other rhythmic practices in South India, such as temple and concert practices of the tabla and mridangam. In this presentation, I address both the systematic and embodied musical theory of Tamil Parai drummers. That is, both the quantitative, positivist aspects of drumming knowledge understood through notational analysis, as well as a more phenomenological, embodied experience of Parai Atam, knowledge as an intersectional and intersensorial art. Inherent to both of these approaches for me as an ethnomusicologist is to ground my analysis in local, contextualized, village, and Dalit epistemology or knowledge systems. To do so, I draw on my fieldwork and experience studying for 4 months in 2008 with the 9 drummers of the Parai collective, Kurinji Malar, from the village of Munivendri near Paramaguri. Yes, this is collective art, and I had 9 teachers, not a single authoritarian guru. As I also draw on my work with an observation of politically conscious Dalit and feminist groups, NGO groups like Shakti Kalaikuru and Budar Kalaikuru, as well as individuals like Arumugan of Alanganallur. My work with these Parai drummers resulted in 2 documentary films, clips from which I will share to exemplify my points, especially about the pedagogical process. Today, the Parai is rarely played by professional troupes without dance, while in summer 2020, a solo drum competition was developed to support artists affected by COVID. Since at least the early 1990s, the art has been called Parai Atam, which we can understand as a Tamil folk genre package of intersectional aesthetic expressions. These genres include rhythmic timbres, rhythmic patterns, adis, tune types, mettu, along with their mnemonics, dance patterns, accents, and ritual purpose. that all function and are experienced together. The communal purpose of the Parai Atam experience is coded in its adis, beats or cyclical rhythmic patterns that are drummed to announce ritual events in the village, such as a Murugan deity festival, bullfighting, a wedding, or a funeral. A quantitative textual approach to Parai music theory should begin with the concept of adi, or rhythmic pattern. In my 4 months of intensive study with Korinji Mahler, I learned more than 35 adis associated with 16 different dance and folk song genres or ritual events. Please note that adi as rhythmic pattern is not equivalent to thala, which is a metrical cycle. It is closer to sarvalagu or teka. It is not subject to specific consistent tempo or tala jnanam. The players can change tempo as they like. Further, the specific pattern conveys a message, like a code, related to its genre to communicate which ritual is occurring. The drumming and dance genres in Korinji Mahler's repertoire included 3 different deity or Sami dances, 7 adi variations called tapatam or temangu, which are fast celebratory patterns, 2 adis to accompany bullfighting, Korevanji or Gypsy people's adi, disco beats inspired by film songs, adis for weddings, first menstruation, and the return of a pregnant daughter to her mother's house for her delivery at the 7th month of gestation, Valekapu. All of these are considered auspicious. Finally, there were 3 adis for various stages in a funeral, the only adis out of likely 60 to 100 that exist considered inauspicious. Most of the adis are in patterns of 6, 8, or 12 pulses per repetition. There are often an internal tension between duple and triple metrical accent, thus dividing the 6 or 12 pulses into 2 or 4 beats, each with a subdivision of 3 pulses and adding an accent of 3 sets of 2 pulses on top of that. And the best way for me to describe this is through the pattern Jen Janaka. So you have Jen and Na as the beat, as 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and Jen Ja Ka as the subdivision of 3. So Jen Janaka, Jen Janaka, Jen Janaka, Jen Janaka. You see the difference. So you put it together. You get 3 against, basically 3 against 2 or 4 against 6. Other patterns, like Samyatam, have 6 beats as well and have the same kind of tension. Jenna Jenna Nak, Jenna Jenna Nak, Jenna Jenna Nak, Jenna Jenna Nak. Or Tapatam is really interesting in that it has 12 beats or pulses, really subdivided into 4, but the way most people play it is at the end we go from a subdivision of 3, Jen, Jen, Nakudi, 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 typical, into Jen, Jen, Nakudi, Naka, Jenna, Jenna, Jen, Jen, Nakudi, Naka, Jenna, Jenna. So the accent shifts from sets of 3 to sets of 2. And then we have Korevanji, Jen, Janaka, Naka, Din, Jen, Janaka, Naka, Din, Jen, Janaka, Naka, Din, which is a 4 or 8 pulse pattern. Thus, combining the accents of 2 metrical fields simultaneously gives the music its life and the ritual participants the urge to dance, aiding in the production of trance states or samivandada. I was also taught various cadence patterns used to shift from one pattern to the next, as well as long cadential patterns used at the end and beginning of performance sections. These all had 3 times repeated phrases, like Amora or Tihai. My teachers referred to them as matra adi or matra root adi. That is, they understood the function of shifting from one adi to the next, metaphorically, like they would change from one bus route to another while going from village to town. An opening pattern which my teacher Arumugan of Alanganallur called Tirmanam acts much like a Tirmanam reduction or Mridangam Korvai pattern, while it is not restricted by a tala structure because of its solo improvisational context. However, it similarly reduces by taking material off the front, And while each line only fully repeats twice, the overlapping of material gives the illusion of a 3-time repetition. Besides its complex musical qualities, each adi has an extra musical association with the event for which it's performed. Those familiar with the art easily orally recognize the differences between patterns. While common villagers generally had only a contextual association of patterns with specific events, such as Samyatam during a goddess festival, distant drumming on a non-festival day usually signaled a funeral for villagers. Parai performances on the ground at village festivals and funerals, as well as on urban stages, have a fairly consistent choreographed form, circle to line to circle. And I'm going to play this for you so that you can notice this. I'm also going to jump around a bit. Group unity is also reflected in the structure of Kurinji Mahler's performance practice. A basic performance has 4 sections, a circle and line formation, flanked by an introduction and conclusion, both in circle formation. Sections are separated by cadences called matra adi, or changing patterns. Each section is made up of a series of rhythmic patterns, or adis. The introduction leads to a gesture of praise for the bass drum through touching the feet of the bass drummer. The bass drummer in Kurinji Mahler is often Palmani, the senior member of the group. Any member can cue the transition cadence or matra adi patterns between beats. You notice very subtle understanding. There is a basic open structure over which improvisation occurs. Collective improvisation draws on both sound and body cues. To the line section. A rolling style adi is used as the transition beat to go to the line formation. The line formation, like the circle, represents unity in the group through precisely coordinated movements. There is an increase in speed toward the end of the line section, leading back to the final circle. At the end of the performance, there is a lengthy final cadence that is usually repeated 3 times. This positivist ethnomusicological approach to Parai music theory, contextualized in village performance, tells us how the adi patterns sound, their counts and metrical accents, the form of performance, as well as the ritual and life cycle events with which they are associated. What this approach does not provide is an analysis of how the performers and community members experience the music and dance. A phenomenological approach to aesthetic analysis would not start with a work, a piece, notation as a generic sign, or a performance, but with the specific experience of the embodied subject in music dance training or performance, not as an object, but as Judith Butler would call an embodied cultural practice. A phenomenological approach to music theory analysis through an audio-visual template of film can bring insight to these perspectives for Parayatam through focus on timbre, accent, groove, intersensorial experience, and the values and practice of collectivity, especially from a pedagogical perspective. While the typical young Dalit person may have a local epistemological understanding of the art and its purpose from having heard it as a child, the student must first learn the drum technique and proper sound for each hand, the source of embodiment of the art. There are two primary strokes. The right hand adikuchi, uses a short stick which plays double strokes, booming accents, and multi-tone articulations in the center and the edge or corner of the drum, striking 3/4 of the way down the circumference of the head. And then the left hand grip, or sindukuchi, right, which is very difficult to master and difficult to hold. This hand also articulates the beat in most adi rhythmic patterns, or where the music is. Next, one learns the parai adi pattern orally using mnemonic drum syllables, or son adis, that orally articulate the timbre, accent, and flow. So, for example, jen janaka, jen janaka, jen janaka. This is followed by learning the sticking patterns associated with the son adi or vaipata, thus kinesthetically further embodying the timbres. Usually after, that is the high, dry snapping and the lower resonant boom. Usually after the drummed adi is secured in the hands, thus kinesthetically habituated in the body, the dance pattern is taught. Yet my teacher Ramu taught me that dance should always be learned while drumming, thus emphasizing the interconnected nature of music structure and embodied practice. Not only is parai drumming and dance intersectional as a performance genre, it is intersensorial. That is, the fundamentally interconnected nature of the senses are unified in the body's perception, and the drum becomes an extension of the hands in both the aesthetic embodiment of the art and its pedagogical process. This is best exemplified by Ramu, who evokes a sense of rasa, or mood.
I was taught that one should always drum while learning to dance.
ஒன்று செவி கொடுத்து அது இன்பத்தை அந்த அடி இவ்வளவுதான் சில அடி சுகமான அடியும் இருக்குது சில இடம் கொஞ்சம் மொட்டை அடியும் அடிக்க வேண்டியது இருக்குது இப்படி பல இது இருக்குது அது வந்து செவி கொடுத்து இந்த அடிக்கு நாட்டம் தானா இந்த அடிக்கு இது தானா.
Ramu's timbre reference to the quality of the beat, sweet or rough, extends the collective nature of the genre to an affective association with the senses. Ramu's lesson also exemplifies what Greg Downey refers to as hearing the process of perception, listening closely to expressions of experience for the echoes of perception on which it might be grounded, or observing directly the inculcation of techniques for hearing, for cultural processes that condition the ear, unquote. That is, to understand musical meaning and specifically how musicness is perceived in sound through pedagogy, we focus on culturally specific processes of listening, or culturally, quote, knowing how to hear, unquote. In the case of parai adis, the quality of the sound, sweet, loud, or rough, determines which dance steps, their polyrhythmic quality, rocking or forward moving, or quick minimal steps, are most appropriate to use with the pattern. Thus, movement is intrinsic to hearing music, as Downey suggests. Quote, one must learn movement in order to hear, unquote. This synthesis between oral and kinesthetic practice is a perceptual system in music phenomenology that we can observe through film. Ramu explains the theoretical knowledge necessary to coordinate parai dance and drumming and reorientation in transition sections, emphasizing the intersectional collective stance that one has to listen. In this clip, also notice how I begin out of sync with the line, but through putting my head up and listening, I lock into the groove of Amalraj in front of me, coming into intercorporal alignment with the group.
அடிக்கும்போது அந்த கையீட்டை பார்த்து சில பேர் இது பண்ணிடுவாங்க. அதே மாதிரி காலாட்டம் வந்து கவனிக்கணும். போட்டு போகும்போது இவர் என்ன ஆட்டம் ஆடி போறாரு, எப்படி காலை தூக்கி வைக்கிறாரு, எப்படி காலை தூக்கி வச்சு குதிச்சு ஆடுறாரு அப்படிங்கிறத கொஞ்சம் கவனமாக இருக்கணும் காலாட்டத்தில் வந்து.
The Catholic nuns at the Shakti Folk Cultural Center in Dindigul, Tamil Nadu used Parayatam to empower female high school dropouts from the Dalit community. Their training goals are first to transform the students' identities through self-esteem and community building from oppressed failures into Shakti Dalits, empowered female anti-caste activists, and second, to reclaim the value of village folk arts and instruments considered by the upper caste to be polluted. A phenomenological analysis of their training process in drumming and dance, as documented in my film Shakti Vibrations, shows the embodied transformation of these girls from outcast pariahs to unified anti-caste Dalits. They develop self-esteem and reclaim their dignity through learning to perform beautifully choreographed, flawlessly executed performances with straight lines and round circles that represent collective unity and equality. Further, they transform their gender into emboldened women, bringing out their inner Shakti or female power through playing the parai, traditionally only performed by men in their communities. Kavita, one of the trainers, articulates this intersectional intent in this interview statement.
பறை அப்படின்னாலே வந்து ஒரு சிலர் வந்து ரொம்ப கேவலமாக நினைப்பாங்க, தப்படிக்கிறவங்க கேவலமாக அப்படின்னு நினைப்பாங்க. அதெல்லாம் வந்து மாற்றி பறை அப்படின்னா ஒரு மேலோங்கி நிற்கிறதா வந்து காட்டுற விதமாக நாங்கள் வந்து பெண்கள் நாங்கள் வந்து தப்பை வந்து கையில் எடுத்து ஆடுறோம் அப்படின்னு நினைக்கிறப்ப ரொம்ப ரொம்ப எனக்கு சந்தோஷமாக இருக்குது.
Sister Felsi further articulates Shakti's method in her introduction to the trainees' 2013 first public performance, saying, quote, "All the barriers of caste, religion, and race are shattered by the majestic sound of the parai. It allows people to live as human beings, creating empathy in the heart," followed by the students singing, quote, "The vibration of the parai takes away our fears," unquote. In shots from the documentary below, we observe the shift from self-reflective consciousness towards intercorporal motor intentionality, or physical alignment with the group. I analyzed the girls' transformation from their inability to play and lack of self-esteem in their early training to confidence and the embodied expression of community, liberation, and joy through synchronicity in their performance at the end of the year. I do so through observing and analyzing the perceptual process of the trainee, bringing the drum, the sound, and the dance into her experience of self-actualization. 2 months later, at their first public performance in August, the students are ritually brought into the troupe. While their sense of community in daily life is still forming, similarly, their lines are still crooked and their circles wobble. At the beginning of the performance, we noticed Reggie. I don't know if you can tell, she's here, second from the left at the beginning of the clip, struggling to get into the groove at the shift of the adi and to perform the dance pattern as the group moves from line to circle. As the group finishes playing the opening 12-unit tapatam adi, Jen, Jen, Nakudi, 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 and directly shifts to Jen, Jen, Nakudi, Nakudi, Naka, Jen, Jen, Nakudi, Naka, Reggie's attention is forward instead of turned to look at and follow the dancer to her left. For the next 3 reiterations of the new pattern, she finds her place in the circle, yet only hits the accented first beat and then the first 2 beats of the pattern, Jen, Jen, remaining upright instead of bending into the accents with her upper body. She misses the second cross of her feet and has to double step, executing the foot pattern correctly only the 4th time. So let's look at this. Standing up, if we only brought to the foreground of our analysis a notated text of the choreographed drum dance patterns that the older girls in the group played and the sounds of which dominate the recording, or even accounted for the background variations or partially articulated patterns that we see Reggie play, we would still miss an understanding of the experience of the relationship between Reggie's drumming articulations and foot pattern, her shifting attention, and the timing and process of her coming into sync with the group. The series of film clips allows us to foreground her process of learning, distinguishing her articulations, played and missed, visually by focusing on the relationship between partially performed sequential articulations of the adi and danced articulations of the feet. Using film, we were able to observe and interpret how Reggie thinks about the previously played and practiced patterns, those she plays in each frame, those to come when she gets in sync, and how she is able to move through this mistake by perceptively striking key structural points in the adi that also fall on accents of the feet. Reggie's experience, process of reorientation, and intercorporal alignment with the group in this film clip clearly shows the relationship between the shifting patterns as well as her movement from self-conscious lack of habituation to a more confident degree of habituated motor intentionality. Incorporating her instrument with her body and her body with the group of other dancers, expressing at least tentatively her power of being in the world through parai dancing and drumming. In conclusion, through these two case studies, and both a positivist and phenomenological approach, I have exemplified that Parai drummers have a music theory. They have a repertoire of dozens of Adi rhythmic patterns associated with the compilation of Tamil folk genre qualities, including dance steps and accents, mnemonic syllables, tunes, performance structure, cadences, thermonims, and they play an irreplaceable role as announcers of ritual and life cycle events through their coded Adis. Through film, we also saw how important it is to understand the relationship between the players as a collective body and how the music and dance parts interact. But what is the most significant aspect of this argument? To assert, like Amaraj did, that Ida Ura Isai, this is a music. Because caste and casteism still exist within the aesthetic milieu and arts institutions of Tamil Nadu, functioning to hierarchize the valuing of different arts, some as pure and some as kochai, degraded. To demonstrate these values of collectivity and empowerment through analysis and ethnomusicological analysis of Parayatam is one means to dismantle this hierarchy. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Zoe Sherinian, for your wonderful presentation this morning. I would again like to thank you for accepting our invitation and presenting today. It is a great privilege to present the vote of thanks for the first international webinar conducted by the School of Music and Fine Arts, Vistas, this morning. I would like to thank Dr. S. Subbulakshmi Madam, our director, for coordinating this entire series. I would like to specially thank Dr. S. Sriman Narayanan Sir, our Vice Chancellor, for accepting our invitation and presenting our inaugural address today. I would again like to thank our management members for their kind support, our Vice Chancellor, Pro Vice Chancellor, Registrar, Controller of Examinations for their kind guidance and help in conducting this webinar series. I would also like to thank our animation department for producing our invitations and helping us through the process. I would like to thank Arun sir for giving us the Zoom link and setting it up for us. I would like to specially thank our panelists for this morning, Dr. Rolf Groisbeck, Dr. Sarah Murali, and Dr. Zoe Sherinian, for kindly accepting our invitation and giving us the videos for the webinar this morning. They have also been very kind to let us know that in case any of the registered participants have any questions, please do contact us. We will pass on your questions to them for getting your answers. I would like to thank all of you for attending today's webinar and being a part of our series, Music and Dance, Learning from Research and Experience. I'm sure all of us have benefited immensely from all the scholarly presentations that we have had and we will be having in the coming months. Thank you all for your kind support and attending the webinars on an ongoing basis. I would like to thank you all again, wishing you all a very good day and a good evening. Namaskarams. Thank you, one and all.